I never imagined the happiest day of my son's life would become the most humiliating moment of mine. But there I was, Audrey Wallace, sitting at table 12 in the back corner of the grand ballroom, watching my new daughter-in-law, Melissa, command the microphone like she owned the world. The wedding had been everything Trevor dreamed of. 260 guests filled the elegant venue. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in ivory silk. I had helped pay for half of it, a detail Melissa had meticulously scrubbed from the narrative. To everyone else, this was her family's generous gift. I smoothed the front of my navy dress and tried to focus on my son's radiant smile. At 32, Trevor looked so much like his father at that age it made my chest tight. He deserved this happiness. He deserved love. I just wished, with every fiber of my being, that he had found it with someone else. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. Melissa stepped up to the microphone, her blonde hair in an updo that cost more than my monthly Social Security check. Her dress, a confection of imported lace, hugged her model thin figure. She was undeniably beautiful, and she knew it. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate this magical day with Trevor and me," she began, her voice carrying across the silent room. "I want to take a moment to thank the people who made this possible." She thanked her glowing parents at the head table. She thanked her bridesmaids, her wedding planner, even the florist. Each name was met with warm applause. Then her gaze found me in the back corner. And of course, I must mention Trevor's mother, Audrey. The way she said my name made it sound like something she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. "She's sitting back there somewhere." 260 pairs of eyes swiveled toward me. My cheeks burned as forks paused halfway to mouths. "Audrey has been quite the presence in our lives," Melissa continued, her smile never wavering. "She's taught me so much about the kind of mother-in-law I never want to become." A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the crowd. I gripped my napkin under the table, my knuckles white. "You see, Audrey represents everything from the old generation that we're trying to move past," she said, her voice dripping with saccharine poison. "She's controlling. She's bitter. And frankly, she's become quite the useless old woman who just can't accept that her little boy has grown up." The silence was deafening, a physical weight that pressed down on the room. I could feel the shock, the secondhand embarrassment. "Did she really just say that?" a woman at the next table whispered. But Melissa wasn't finished. "So here's to leaving behind toxic family members who serve no purpose except to drag us down." She raised her champagne glass high. "Here's to moving forward without dead weight, and here's to Trevor finally being free from his mother's manipulative grip." The response was scattered, confused. I watched my son's face drain of color as he stared at his new wife in horror. Every instinct told me to run, to slip out the back door and cry in my car like I had so many times over the past 2 years as Melissa systematically destroyed my relationship with my only child. That's what the old Audrey would have done. But I wasn't the same woman who had let people walk over her for 70 years. I stood up slowly. The legs of my chair scraped against the marble floor, a sound that echoed through the stunned silence like a gunshot. Every head turned toward me again, but this time I didn't shrink. I reached under my table and retrieved the small black suitcase I had brought with me. It was old, battered, with brass corners that had dulled with age. My fingers wrapped around the worn leather handle, and a strange, cold calm settled over me. Without a word, I began walking toward the front of the room. My low heels clicked against the floor in a steady rhythm, impossibly loud in the absolute silence. I passed table after table of wide-eyed guests, their mouths open. Melissa's confident smile faltered. "Audrey, what are you doing?" she hissed, taking a step back from the microphone. "Mom!" Trevor's voice cracked as he stood up from the head table. "Mom, sit down. What are you doing?" I didn't answer him. I couldn't trust my voice yet. I climbed the 3 steps onto the stage, set my suitcase down on the white tablecloth beside the elaborate wedding cake, and turned to face the room. I adjusted the microphone. "Melissa," I said, my voice surprisingly steady as it boomed through the speakers. "You called me useless. You called me dead weight. You said I serve no purpose." The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. "But you see, dear, the thing about being 70 years old is that you learn to pay attention. You learn to notice things. And over the past year, I've noticed quite a few interesting things about you." I placed my hand on top of the suitcase. "Things that I think your new husband should know about. Things that I think all these lovely guests should know about." I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the room before landing back on Melissa's increasingly pale face. "Things about what you were doing last night while your future husband was at his bachelor party." Her bouquet trembled. "You're a crazy old woman," she whispered, but the microphone picked it up. I smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd felt in months. "Perhaps, but I'm a crazy old woman with excellent eyesight and a very good memory." My fingers moved to the first latch of the suitcase. The metallic click echoed forever. "Shall we see what I've discovered?" The suitcase opened with a soft whoosh, revealing neat stacks of photographs and documents. The top layer contained 8x10 color photographs printed at the drugstore just this morning. I picked up the first one and held it high. Even from the back of the room, the image was clear. Melissa, in a passionate embrace with a dark-haired man who was definitely not my son. They were standing in the doorway of the Monarch Hotel downtown, her hands tangled in his hair, his lips pressed against her neck. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. "This was taken last night at 11:47 p.m., I announced, my voice cutting through the silence. "Approximately 3 hours after you told my son you needed to go home early because you had a headache and wanted to be rested for your wedding day." Melissa's face had gone completely white. The bouquet slipped from her hands and hit the floor, white roses scattering across the stage. "That's not... You can't. How did you..." "Seen the affair." I set down the first photograph and picked up the second one. This one showed Melissa and the same man walking hand in hand toward the hotel elevator, her head thrown back in laughter. She was wearing the little black dress she'd said she was saving for a special occasion. "This is Miles Dawson," I continued, as calmly as if I were reading a grocery list. "He's a real estate developer from Phoenix, married, 3 children. He and Melissa have been seeing each other for the past 8 months. Mom, what is this?" Trevor finally found his voice, his face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. I looked at my son, the man I had raised and loved for 32 years. He deserved the truth, even if it shattered him. "I'm showing you who you really married, sweetheart." I picked up the third photograph, this one even more damning. Melissa and Miles in what was clearly a hotel room, captured through the window. I had felt sick taking it, but I knew words alone wouldn't be enough. "Melissa, please tell me this isn't real," Trevor whispered, his voice breaking. "She's trying to ruin us." Melissa finally found her voice, a shrill shriek. "This is fake. She probably hired an actor." "Oh, my dear," I interrupted, reaching back into the suitcase. "We're just getting started." I pulled out a manila folder thick with printed emails and text messages. "My neighbor's grandson, Dylan, is a very computer-savvy young man," I explained. He was very helpful in recovering deleted messages from Melissa's phone after she carelessly left it unlocked during a family dinner. "These are text messages between you and Miles," I said, opening the folder. "Would you like me to read some of them aloud? They're quite explicit." "No." Melissa lunged toward me, but her elaborate dress made her clumsy. She stumbled, catching herself on the cake table. "You had no right. You violated my privacy." "Privacy?" I stepped back, keeping the folder out of her reach. "You gave up your right to privacy the moment you decided to lie to my son and use him for his money." The room erupted in whispers. I could see guests pulling out their phones, recording. "Let me read just one message," I said, adjusting my reading glasses. "From 3 days ago, Melissa to Miles. Can't wait for this wedding circus to be over. T is so boring in bed, but his trust fund makes up for it. 2 more years and I can file for divorce with enough alimony to keep us both comfortable. Then we can finally be together openly." The sound Trevor made was barely human, a wounded animal noise that cut straight through my heart. He sank back into his chair, his hands covering his face. Melissa spun around to face the guests, her composure completely shattered. "She's lying. She made this up. She's always hated me because she's a jealous, bitter old hag." "Did I make up the hotel receipts too?" I asked mildly, pulling out another stack of papers. "You've been quite generous with Miles, haven't you? Expensive dinners, weekend getaways, even bought him a Rolex last month, all charged to the credit card that my son pays for." I held up a receipt from Tiffany & Co. $2,400 for a man's watch, I read. "The same day you told Trevor you couldn't afford to contribute to the wedding flowers." More gasps. Someone's wine glass shattered on the floor. "Marin, is this true?" Melissa's father stood up abruptly, his voice booming with a father's rage and humiliation. "Daddy, no! She's making it all up!" But even as she protested, I could see the doubt in her father's eyes. I reached back into the suitcase one more time. "There's more, Melissa. So much more." I pulled out a business registration document. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice when you convinced Trevor to invest in that fake company Miles told you about?" Trevor's head snapped up. "What company? Melissa, you said that was your brother's startup." "It was!" she shrieked, but her voice cracked. "It is!" I held up the document. "Miles Dawson Development, LLC, incorporated 6 months ago in Nevada. No actual business address, no employees, no assets. Just a shell company designed to funnel $50,000 from my son to your boyfriend." The room was in chaos now. Guests were talking loudly, some standing up to get a better view. I held up a hand and the room quieted slightly. "But I know what you're all thinking. Audrey, why do this? Why here?" I looked at Trevor, my heart aching for him, because I tried to do this the right way. I really did. My first hint that something was wrong was 3 months ago. I saw Melissa at a cafe downtown with Miles. They looked cozy, too cozy. I took a picture on my phone. I was going to show it to you, Trevor, but she saw me. That night, I continued, Melissa came to Trevor crying. She said I was stalking her, that I'd followed her to a meeting with a colleague and took pictures like some kind of private eye. She twisted it. She made me the villain. Trevor flinched, remembering the fight. "Mom, You believed her," I said, not unkindly. "She was your fiancé. I was just your controlling mother. That was her first trap. She isolated me from you completely after that. I couldn't come to you with proof, because she had already poisoned the well. So, I was on my own. I knew I couldn't just follow her. I used the last of my emergency savings, what she hadn't already convinced you to borrow from me, and I hired a private investigator, a cheap one. It was all I could afford." I tossed a small, blurry photo onto the table. "This is what he gave me, a picture of Melissa having lunch with another man. I was devastated. I thought, this is it. This is the proof. But I'm not useless, Melissa. I notice things. I recognize the man. It was an old college friend of hers. I checked his social media. He was in town for 1 day. She met him intentionally. She knew she was being followed, so she threw her tracker a decoy. It was a false lead. It cost me 2 weeks and $2,500 I didn't have, and it made me furious, because I realized I wasn't dealing with a simple cheater. I was dealing with a professional. So I did what I had to do. I sold my mother's silver. I hired a real investigator, a former federal agent, and I told him, dig. Dig everywhere. And oh, did he dig. But while he was digging, I was noticing. I reached back into the suitcase and pulled out a small velvet jewelry box. I opened it, revealing the empty silk interior. "This box used to contain a necklace that belonged to my grandmother," I said. "It was valued at $12,000. It was supposed to go to Trevor's future wife on their wedding day." "Trevor," I said, "do you remember when I had that terrible flu 3 months ago, the weekend you were in Seattle?" He nodded, his face pale. "Melissa so thoughtfully offered to check on me. She was alone in my house for nearly an hour while she ran to the pharmacy for me. When I went to get the necklace this morning, it was gone." "You're insane," Melissa whispered, her voice lacking conviction. "I would never steal from you." "Wouldn't you?" I asked, pulling out another document. "This is a pawn shop receipt from Miller's on Franklin Street, dated 3 months and 2 days ago. One antique sapphire necklace, sold for $3,500. And thankfully," I added, "Miller's keeps excellent records." I held up a photocopy of Melissa's driver's license. Several guests gasped. "Trevor!" Melissa shrieked, turning to him. "She's lying! She's making this all up because she can't stand that I took her precious little boy away." "Am I making this up too?" I asked, pulling out a second pawn shop receipt. "Your great-grandmother's wedding ring, Trevor. The one I showed Melissa last Christmas. The one I told her would be passed down to your wife, pawned 2 weeks after she saw it." The sound that came from my son was heartbreaking. He sank back into his chair, covering his face. "Now, Melissa," I said, "you're very smart. I'll give you that. You must have realized I was on to you, because 2 weeks ago, just after my investigator delivered those pawn receipts to my house, someone broke in." I looked out at the guests. "They didn't take my TV. They didn't take my silver. They took 2 things, my laptop and a single manila folder sitting on my desk, the folder containing this evidence." She lost her advantage. She thought I had nothing. She thought she'd won. She even had the nerve to call me so sorry to hear about the scary break-in. She probably assumed I'd just give up, go back to being the useless old woman in the corner. Melissa was shaking her head, her eyes wide with genuine terror now. She was realizing where this was going. "But you made a mistake, Melissa, a very modern mistake. You assumed that because the paper copies were gone, the evidence was gone." I went back to Dylan, my neighbor's tech-savvy grandson. I told him my laptop was stolen and asked if there was any way to get my files. He just laughed. He said, "Mrs. Wallace, everything's in your cloud backup. I set it up for you last year, remember?" He restored everything, the pawn receipts, the photos, the texts, but he also found more. He found files you had been working on, Melissa. Files you thought were safely hidden on my own computer, in a folder labeled gardening. You were using my laptop to plan your next moves, assuming I was too stupid to ever find them. That break-in, losing that advantage, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it led me straight to the real crimes. I reached into the suitcase again, this time pulling out a thick folder that made Melissa's eyes widen. The jewelry was just the beginning, wasn't it? When a few thousand wasn't enough to keep Miles happy, you needed a bigger score. "Stop," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "Please, just stop." "This," I announced, holding up an official-looking document, "is a forged deed for my house, the house that's been in my family for 43 years. According to this, I signed my property over to you last month as an early wedding gift." "The signature is quite good," I continued, examining it. "You must have practiced, but you made one crucial mistake. You dated it for a day when I was in the hospital having my hip surgery, the day you so kindly volunteered to house-sit for me." "Trevor," Melissa cried desperately, "I was just trying to help. Your mother is getting older. I thought if the house was in my name, I could make sure she was taken care of." "By selling it?" I interrupted, pulling out yet another document. "This is a listing agreement with Weston Realty. You were planning to put my house on the market next week, while Trevor and I were— Oh, wait. while you and Trevor were on your honeymoon." The room erupted in angry murmurs. Melissa's own mother was staring at her in horror. "The plan was brilliant, really," I said conversationally. "Sell my house, claim I'd agreed to it, but forgot due to my age. Who would believe a confused old woman over a respectable young married couple? That's not... I would never... Wouldn't you?" I asked, pulling out one final document from the folder. "This is a power of attorney form, also forged. It gives you complete control over my finances, my property, and my medical decisions, dated the same day as the deed." The silence that followed was deafening. "You were going to steal everything from my mother," Trevor said, his voice flat with disbelief. "Everything. She's an old woman," Melissa screamed, her composure completely shattered. "She's going to die soon anyway. Why should she hoard all that money when we could use it?" A collective gasp. "And there it is," I said calmly into the microphone. "The truth at last. You saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to be removed." "But you're right about one thing, Melissa. Stealing my house was a good plan. But you needed a failsafe. You needed to make sure that if I did find out, no one would believe me." I opened a new envelope worn from handling. "You've been very busy, systematically destroying the relationship between Trevor and me," I said, pulling out printed emails. "Trevor," I said, "remember when your cousin Jessica stopped calling me? This is an email Melissa sent her last Christmas. I'm so worried about Audrey. She's become increasingly controlling and paranoid. She calls 20 times a day. I think she might be developing dementia." From the back, I heard Jessica gasp. "Audrey, she told me. She said you were..." "And this one," I continued, "went to your boss, Trevor, Mr. Price." I read it aloud. "I'm writing to express concerns. Audrey has been calling the office repeatedly, obsessed with monitoring his whereabouts, concerned it might affect his professional reputation." Trevor's face went white. That's why Mr. Price put me on probation. He said I had family distractions I needed to manage. I thought I'd done something wrong." "But this one," I said, my voice shaking with rage for the first time. "This one is my favorite." I held up an email to our family doctor. "Dear Dr. Hayes, I'm writing to express concerns about Audrey Wallace's mental state. She's been making wild accusations, claiming people are stealing from her. I think she needs a psychiatric evaluation." A man at table 15 stood up abruptly. It was Dr. Hayes. "Melissa, you sent me that email. I asked Audrey to come in for cognitive testing because of your concerns. I spent weeks worried about her. You made our family doctor think I was losing my mind," I said, my voice steady again. "You created a paper trail of my mental decline, all while you were robbing me blind." The pieces were falling into place, and I could see the horror on Trevor's face as he realized the scope of the manipulation. "Every canceled dinner," I said, "every missed phone call. She was the one creating the static." I pulled out a small notebook. "This is my daily journal, Trevor. March 15th, last year. Trevor called to cancel Sunday dinner. He said I had called Melissa a gold digger at Sandra's birthday party. But I never said that. I barely spoke to her." His Aunt Sandra stood up from her table. "Audrey, you were nothing but polite at my party. I remember being impressed by how gracious you were, especially since she ignored everyone." May 22nd, I read. "Trevor says I'm being too pushy. Melissa told him I called her selfish for wanting to spend their anniversary alone. I never called about their anniversary." June 3rd. "Marin told Trevor I criticized her cooking after my surgery. I thanked her 3 times. With each entry, Trevor seemed to shrink further into his chair." "But perhaps the most cruel manipulation," I said, pulling out a photograph, "was this." I held up a photo of Melissa and me at last year's Mother's Day brunch at Rocco's. We were both smiling. "I paid for this meal," I said. Then I pulled out a printed screenshot of Melissa's social media post. I read the caption aloud. "Treating my difficult mother-in-law to brunch. even though she's been criticizing everything I do lately. Sometimes you have to be the bigger person. 47 comments, I said, from people sympathizing with her. People I've known for decades, telling her how strong she was for putting up with me. You turned my own community against me, I said quietly. Mom, Trevor's voice was hoarse. I'm so sorry. I believed her. Every time, I believed her. Why wouldn't you? I asked gently. She was your wife. You trusted her, and she was very, very good at lying. I placed the journal back in the suitcase. But there's one more thing, Melissa. One lie that's bigger than all the others. I held up a single sheet of paper. This is a letter from my law firm, Pierce, Weldon and Associates. It's about my will, the will you convinced Trevor I should update to include you as a beneficiary. I paused, looking directly at her terrified face. Would you like to know what you would have inherited? The room was silent. You see, I said, 6 months ago I did go to my lawyers, and I had them do a complete investigation of my finances. I cleared my throat and began to read. Dear Mrs. Wallace, after completing our comprehensive review, we regret to inform you that your estate is currently worth $47,000. The gasp was audible. Melissa's mouth fell open. That's impossible. Trevor said you owned the house outright. I did own it outright, I said sadly, looking at my son, until I mortgaged it, to help pay for your wedding, your car payments, and all those emergencies you two seem to have every month. The vacation to Europe last year, I said, that was $23,000, charged to my home equity line of credit. The house you thought was worth $450,000, it has a mortgage balance of $390,000. Mom, why didn't you tell me? Trevor whispered, his face buried in his hands. You didn't ask, I said gently. Melissa asked, and she made it sound like temporary loans. I pulled a bank statement from my purse. This is my checking account balance as of yesterday. $347. Melissa looked like she'd been slapped. All of it. All the scheming, the lies, the crimes. For nothing. An inheritance that didn't exist. But that's not the best part, I continued, reaching back into my suitcase one final time. Because while I was at the lawyer's office, I asked them to do something else. I asked my investigator to dig deeper into you, Melissa. I pulled out a thick folder marked Confidential Investigation Report. Should I start with your previous marriage? I asked conversationally. Trevor's head snapped up. Previous what? The one you forgot to mention to Trevor, I said. You were married to a gentleman named Richard Cole from 2018 to 2020, divorced after you emptied his bank accounts and disappeared. You were married before? Trevor whispered. Melissa, you told me I was your first husband. Or perhaps we should discuss your criminal record, I continued, flipping a page. 3 counts of check fraud in Nevada, 2 counts of identity theft in California, and my personal favorite, a conviction for elder abuse in Oregon, where you convinced an 80-year-old woman, a Mrs. Doris Palmer, to sign over her pension checks to you. Melissa's breathing was coming in short, panicked gasps. Guests were on their phones. I heard someone say, "Yes, I'd like to report a crime in progress." The Oregon case is particularly interesting, I said, because the victim, Mrs. Palmer, was suffering from early-stage dementia, and you convinced her family you were a certified caregiver. Sound familiar? I looked up, meeting her terrified eyes. That's what you were planning for me, wasn't it? Have me declared incompetent, get yourself appointed as my guardian, and drain every penny I had. That's not true, she shrieked. You're a crazy old woman and everyone knows it. Am I making up this warrant for your arrest? I asked, pulling out the final document. The state of Oregon has been looking for you for 18 months, Melissa. Or should I say, Ms. Roberts? Or perhaps Ms. Cole? They are very interested in talking to you about what happened to Mrs. Doris Palmer's life savings. You're a fugitive. Trevor breathed, standing up so abruptly his chair crashed to the floor. "You're wanted by the police." "It's all lies," Melissa screamed, pointing at me. "She's trying to destroy me." "Actually," said a calm, firm voice from the back of the room, "she's telling the truth." Every head in the ballroom turned. 2 uniformed police officers were walking through the doors. The taller one, a woman with gray hair and a no-nonsense expression, was holding a warrant. "Melissa Elizabeth Davidson," the officer announced, her voice silencing the room, "also known as Melissa Cole, also known as Melissa Roberts. You're under arrest for violations of your parole agreement with the state of Oregon." The room erupted in chaos. Melissa tried to run, but her elaborate dress and heels made it impossible. She made it 3 steps before stumbling and falling to her knees, her veil tangling around her arms like restraints. "You don't understand," she sobbed as the officers approached. "I love him. I really do love Trevor. Everything I did was for us." "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent," the officer, whose name tag read Croft, said, helping her up with professional efficiency. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As they read her rights, Melissa turned to look at Trevor one last time, her makeup streaked with tears, her hair coming loose. "Trevor, please, don't let them do this. I'm your wife. We just got married." But Trevor wasn't looking at her. He was staring at me, his face a mask of gratitude and shame that broke my heart. "Actually," said the second police officer, a younger man with kind eyes, "according to the state of Oregon, she was already legally married to Mr. Richard Cole when she entered into this ceremony, which makes today's wedding legally invalid." The words hit Trevor like a physical blow. He sank back into his chair, all the fight gone. As the police led Melissa away in handcuffs, her sobs echoing through the ballroom, I finally allowed myself to feel the exhaustion that had been building for months. I closed my suitcase, my hands trembling only slightly. I looked out at the sea of shocked faces. "I believe," I said into the microphone, my voice carrying clearly through the chaos, "that concludes this evening's entertainment." I picked up my suitcase and walked slowly off the stage. My low heels clicked against the marble floor with the same steady rhythm. But this time, I wasn't walking toward a confrontation. I was walking toward freedom. 3 weeks later, I sat in my small kitchen, morning sunlight streaming through the curtains. The house was quiet, and for the first time in 2 years, the silence felt peaceful instead of lonely. The aftermath had been swift. Melissa was extradited to Oregon within 72 hours. Her bail was denied. Trevor had moved back into his apartment downtown. He couldn't face the house he had shared with her, surrounded by lies. He visited me every few days now, bringing groceries or offering to help with repairs. Our conversations were still careful. 2 years of manipulation don't disappear overnight. But yesterday, he had just sat at this table for 2 hours, just talking about his work, his friends, a book he was reading. Normal. It felt normal. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reflection. When I opened it, I found Detective Sandra Croft, the officer who had arrested Melissa. She was holding a manila envelope. "Mrs. Wallace," she said with a slight smile, "I have some news about your case." I invited her in for coffee. We sat at my kitchen table. "First," Detective Croft said, opening her envelope, "I wanted to return these to you." She pulled out my grandmother's sapphire necklace and my mother's wedding ring, wrapped in tissue. We were able to recover them from Miller's. The owner was very cooperative. My hands trembled as I unwrapped the necklace. I had thought they were lost forever. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice thick. "There's more," she continued. "The forged documents were excellent evidence. Melissa is being charged with multiple felonies here, in addition to the Oregon warrant. Her lawyer is recommending she accept a plea deal." She pulled out another document. "Part of that deal includes full restitution, the pawn shop money, the investigation costs. even compensation for the emotional distress. I looked at the figure. $15,000. But I only lost about $4,000. The DA's office felt the psychological manipulation and attempted fraud warranted additional compensation, she explained. It's not a fortune, but it should help. What about Miles? I asked. The man she was having an affair with. Detective Croft smiled grimly. Mr. Dawson has some legal troubles of his own. His wife found out about the affair and filed for divorce. She also discovered he had been embezzling from his company to fund his lifestyle with Melissa. He's facing his own criminal charges. After she left, I sat alone, holding the necklace up to the light. The sapphires threw tiny blue rainbows across the walls. The phone rang. Trevor, on the caller ID. My heart still skipped, but now with anticipation, not anxiety. "Hi, Mom." His voice was warm. "I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner tonight. I found a new recipe for that chicken dish you used to make." "You want to cook?" "For me?" I asked, surprised. "I want to learn," he said. "I realized I don't know how to make any of the foods that remind me of home. I thought, maybe you could teach me." After we hung up, I sat quietly, processing this small, significant shift. For years, I had been the one reaching out. Now he was doing the reaching. That evening, Trevor arrived with grocery bags and a nervous smile. We spent 3 hours in my kitchen, side by side, as I taught him the secrets to my mother's chicken recipe. He asked questions. He asked about me. For the first time in years, he saw me as a person, not a problem. As we sat down to eat, he looked across the table at me, his eyes full of a simple, uncomplicated love I hadn't seen in far too long. "Mom," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology. Not just for believing her lies, but for letting our relationship get so broken that she could manipulate us in the first place." I reached across the table and took his hand. "We both made mistakes, sweetheart. What matters is that we're here now." Later that night, after he'd gone home with leftovers and a promise to call tomorrow, I sat on my front porch in my mother's old rocking chair. I thought about Melissa, sitting in a jail cell, finally facing the consequences. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I mostly felt sad for her. But my sadness for her was tempered by a deeper feeling of peace. She could no longer hurt my family. I pulled my grandmother's necklace from my pocket, feeling the weight of it in my palm. Tomorrow, I would put it back in its box, safe. But tonight, I just wanted to hold it, to feel connected to the generations of strong women who had worn it before me, women who had faced their own challenges, their own betrayals. I had chosen freedom, and for the first time in 70 years, I understood what that truly meant. I rocked gently in my mother's chair, my grandmother's necklace warm in my palm, and smiled into the gathering darkness. I was exactly where I belonged. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.